So leopard geckos are out of hibernation and starting to breed. I tell you what, the leopard gecko is certainly one of the best pet lizards out there, and it's really an avenue for people to start keeping reptiles. Oftentimes when someone wants to buy a reptile, but they're a little bit afraid of snakes, they look to leopard geckos. They're a great option. And one of the things is they're extremely easy to care for when it comes to lizards, because a lot of lizards need a little bit more of an advanced setup. In particular, UV lighting. The thing that's brilliant about leopard geckos is the fact that they don't need UV lighting, and if you're going to breed them, you can actually keep them in a rack system. But certainly if you're keeping them as a pet, you can keep them with a light. You can even put UV light on them because it makes them look really good. But they are a nocturnal animal that's from the areas of Pakistan and spend the majority of their life in caves during the day and then go wandering around at night. So they get very little UV light from the sun in the wild. I'm going to go ahead and talk about how we breed leopard geckos, what their reproduction is like, and of course show you some really cool animals in this week's Snake Bites episode. Okay, let's get started on leopard geckos. Of course, I'm a breeder, so that means that I want to keep them in a racking system because it's the easiest and simplest way to do it. But if you're keeping a pet leopard gecko, you can certainly keep it in something like a 10-gallon aquarium, just with the proper humidity and temperatures. Absolutely fine. But one of the things that is a necessity is a good hiding spot. Now, we keep 4 females in each cage, and then we rotate a male through them. The females can get along fine, but the males will fight, so you don't ever want to have 2 males in a cage, and you really don't want to have a male and female together because oftentimes they'll stress each other out. The males will go off of food because they want to breed, and then they overbreed the females, which causes the females to stress out and go off food. So the best thing to do is keep all females in a cage or keep them individually separate. Regardless, we just keep a hide box just like this with a hole cut in it, which again is simulating how they are in the wild, where they're going to spend the majority of their time down in caves. Now what we want to do is we want to use a cocoa fiber in the bottom, and we keep that a little bit damp. We'll keep anywhere from a ½ inch to 1 inch of cocoa fiber. It really acts for a few different things. Number one, it keeps the humidity up in a hide box, which helps them shed, which is really important because you want to make sure that there's no shed on the toes of the leopard gecko. But also when you're breeding them, it acts as a great egg substrate. So they'll actually bury their eggs in that substrate, and that causes their eggs to stay hydrated and hatch well. Let's take a look at the simplicity of keeping leopard geckos, in particular in a breeding setting. We just keep paper on the bottom. It's really easy to clean, and it just helps us keep things as sanitary as possible. The one thing you probably want to stay away from is sand, because sand can impact leopard geckos. As a matter of fact, our new product line will have a replacement sand that I think will be perfect for keeping a gecko if you want something that looks pretty natural. But regardless, just paper on the bottom. We just want a little water cup. We're going to use another deli cup, and we feed mainly mealworms here. Now, we will supplement with crickets from time to time and even roaches, but the vast majority of their diet is just mealworms that are dusted with vitamin powder and calcium powder. Very important to make sure your gecko has both calcium and vitamins because they can get metabolic bone disease. So the vitamins are essential. Again, we talked about the hide box, and then other than that, all we want to do is keep about a 92 to 95 degree hot spot with the cool side about 82 degrees. Let's get into the breeding process. Now, the best production you can have is when you do a little bit of a cool down. Typically about 2 months, you want to drop the temperature into the low 70s and give them a dormant period. We literally put them into a dark room for about 2 months, but it's really important to clean their system out about 2 weeks at normal temperatures prior to putting them down, because when you brumate a reptile, their digestive system basically stops. And of course, if they have food matter in them, it's going to rot and potentially kill them. So once you've cleaned them out, you cool them down to the low 70s for about 2 months, then you bring them up, give them about a week to adjust to the temperature, then you turn the heat back onto that 92 to 95 degree with the 82 degree cool spot. We immediately start to feed them mealworms, and then within a week we start putting males and females together. Now, I've said we keep up to 4 females in a cage, and then we actually cycle 1 male through those cages. We'll breed anywhere from 12 to 16 females with each male. After breeding for about 2 weeks, we'll start to see the first first females starting to show signs of ovulation. When it comes to ovulation in leopard geckos, which typically happens anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks out of hibernation or brumation, you can actually turn a female leopard gecko over, and right in the belly area you start to see the growth of the eggs. First they come out like a discolored ovulation, and then they actually look like white little eggs in them, and of course you can follow that growth as you breed them. To finish up the breeding segment, because I don't want to get too deep into it, I'm going to do plenty of shows on breeding leopard geckos over the next couple months, I can promise you that. Let's just talk about the fact that how I cycle a male. I'll essentially put a male in for 24 hours in with those 4 females. Then I actually put them into the next cage and the next cage, typically cycling them through 3 or 4 cages a week. Once he's cycled through those cages, I'll go ahead and give him 2 or 3 days off just to recuperate, because males will breed themselves to death. They'll really slow down on food, and if you breed them too much, you can certainly kill them. So giving them that 2 or 3 days off a week really replenishes the animal and ultimately can keep them healthy and keep going for years and years to come. But let's go ahead and get into why leopard geckos are so amazing. Really, we've already talked about the ease of care. That is huge. Also, how docile they are. They're a super docile animal. You really almost never get bit. In all the years I've been working with leopard geckos, I've only been bit one time, and it was totally a time that was my mistake. Like I had said, males will actually fight. So I actually handled a male and then went to pick up another male, and it smelled the male on my hand. It was during the breeding season, and he just nipped me really quick, and that's the only time I've ever been bit. But the biggest thing, I think the popularity of leopard geckos has exploded over the last 10 years is how polymorphic they are. Just basically meaning there are a ton of paint jobs. And those paint jobs really started with one mutation, and that was, of course, tangerines. And that's just basically a line-bred trait, breeding the prettiest orange animals together generation after generation, continuing to get more and more orange animals. But to back up 1 second, there's really a few types of mutations when it comes to leopard geckos. There's polygenic, which are the tangerines, which is a line-bred trait. Then there's a recessive mutation like Murphy's patternless and albinos and a few others, which means that you breed them and you produce recessive animals that are heterozygous and then ultimately breed them back to 2 homozygous animals. And then lastly, there's the dominant codominant genes, things like the white and yellows or the Mac snows. We're going to try to cover all of them right now, but it all started with the tangerines. Here would be an example of both codominant and polygenic. The polygenic part is the bold part, which is basically just the kind of striping down their back. Again, what would happen over generations is to take an animal that just has a little bit of striping and continue to breed it to the most striped animals. Over 2, 3, 4 generations, they become more bold and more bold. And then this would happen to be a Mac snow, which is a codominant mutation. So when you breed 2 Mac snows together, you produce a super snow. And this would be the super snow. Again, this is the super version of a Mac snow. And basically how it works is if you breed a Mac snow to a Mac snow, on average about 1 in 4 babies will come out this pattern, which is a super snow. Now when you breed the super snow back to a normal, you'll get 100% Mac snows, or if you breed it to a Mac snow, you'll get about 50% Mac snow on average. But some of the mutations that come along with it are crazy. This happens to be a super snow white and yellow eclipse. Now the eclipse is actually an eye pigment gene that causes the pattern and of course the color of the eyes to change a lot. But take a look at how amazing that animal is. So knowing that these mutations come in a few different varieties, polygenic, recessive, codominant, dominant, you can start mixing genes together, producing some really amazing mutations. Things like this tangerine white and yellow. Now the white and yellow gene is a dominant gene that really causes the yellow and interesting patterns to show up. It just really increases the xanthophores, which is that yellow pigment. And of course the tangerine was the line-bred trait. But when you put the tangerine and the white and yellow together, not only do you get amazing oranges, but you get amazing yellows too. And the pattern just absolutely pops. I mean, look at how awesome that animal is. What do you say we just look at some really cool leopard geckos? This happens to be a hypo snow white and yellow. Again, the hypo gene is another polygenic gene that is just basically being bred to reduce the amount of melanin so you have less black in the animal. And the snow gene we already talked about being codominant, and of course the dominant white and yellow gene. You put those together, that makes one incredible animal. This is a really beautiful animal here. This happens to be a pastel tremper white and yellow. The pastel gene is another polygenic gene. The tremper gene is an albino, which happens to be one of the 3 recessive albinos. And unfortunately, none of those 3 recessive albinos are compatible. So if you breed them together, you get all normal babies. And of course, we've already talked about the white and yellow gene. So you put those together, wow. Now another one of the albinos would happen to be the Bell albino, which again is not compatible with the tremper albino, but I think it's actually a prettier form of albino, to be honest with you. And this one here would happen to be a Bell white and yellow. So you can kind of tell the difference between the tremper white and yellow and the Bell white and yellow. And then this one happens to be a bold Bell white and yellow. And that's again a polygenic trait. That's that bold striping pattern. It's the dominant white and yellow in the recessive albino Bell. I mean, that is just a gorgeous animal. And to me, the white and yellow Bell stuff is my favorite of all the white and yellows and all the albinos. This one happens to be a Super Snow white and yellow. Again, we showed you the Super Snow. We even showed you a Super Snow white and yellow eclipse. This just happens to be the Super Snow white and yellow. And you can see how different each mutation is. Again, when you start adding or subtracting genes, it really changes the appearance, the color, the pattern, everything in the animal. So it's really neat with leopard geckos, if you're ever thinking about breeding them, is the fact that you can really be a mad scientist when it comes to paint jobs. There's a million of them out there and a million more to be made over the next 10 or 12 years. I just came across this animal and I thought it was absolutely gorgeous, so I thought I would show it off. This happens to be a bold snow hypo white and yellow. I mean, you just combine all of those mutations together and take a look at it. I just love that almost white look with kind of the freckling. It's almost a little bit like a Dalmatian gecko. I talked about the eclipse gene before having the eye pigment change. Well, then there's the raptors, which are actually the tremper albinos bred to the eclipse. So it's an eclipse tremper albino. But the original ones were called raptor because they were patternless. But now you can have a raptor that has pattern. It can have bands, it can be patternless, or it can be striped. This happens to be a striped raptor. And this happens to be the Bell version of the raptor, which is actually called a radar. And again, the eclipse gene really does some weird stuff to the pattern. You can see how weird this Bell animal is. I absolutely love the radars. I think this happens to be one of the most gorgeous of my leopard geckos. This, of course, is a super raptor white and yellow. So basically what it is a Super Snow, it's a white and yellow, it's a tremper, and it's eclipse. Now, not all of them come out this pure white color. They can sometimes have a little bit of pied patterning to them, but I think the pure white ones are absolutely incredible. And again, they have those really beet red eyes. Now, one of the things about the albinos, as you can see with this guy, is he has his eyes closed. Their eyes can be a little bit sensitive to the light, so when you bring them out in the light, they oftentimes will close their eyes. But when you get them back in their cage and they open their eyes and they're just solid red eyes, I mean, it's absolutely stunning. This is a pretty interesting animal. This happens to be an emerine tremper that's head eclipse, and it's also part of the giant gene. Now, the giant gene is a polygenic trait that just keeps breeding the larger and larger leopard geckos. So instead of maxing out at maybe 75 grams, they'll go 100, 110, even bigger than that grams. And again, that's just generation after generation of breeding giants. So this is actually that bloodline. And the emerine is another polygenic trait that is breeding out the green in leopard geckos. So a lot of times you see the oranges or other colors, but the emerine line and a couple other lines are breeding for the most green as well. So it just brings out different hues in the leopard geckos. This happens to be a blazing blizzard. Now, it's a recessive mutation and it's kind of almost white as babies, but as they get older, they turn a little bit brown looking, much like the Murphy's patternless. So when bred into the albino, it makes them a blazing blizzard, and it keeps the color really much nicer. It's not pure white, but it's still really beautiful. Now, you can make the blazing blizzard with any of the 3 lines, either the Bell line, the tremper line, or the Vegas line. It's all exactly the same. This happens to be a tremper blazing blizzard. This happens to be an enigma, which is a dominant mutation that came onto the leopard gecko scene pretty early on, and it was really a trendsetter because there was nothing like it in leopard geckos before. It really changed the color and pattern of animals extremely with one generation. Now, unfortunately, it also comes with a neurological glitch, so a lot of people stay away from enigmas, and we have only a very small group of them because of that neurological issue. And basically what it is, especially when they get more stressed, they will kind of waggle around. Sometimes they walk in circles, almost chasing chasing their tail. Other than that, they seem to be completely healthy. But again, there's a saying that all recessives concentrate. So sometimes when you're concentrating a phenotype or a pattern color mutation like an Enigma, you also can concentrate some other neurological glitches. We see it in snakes as well. Regardless, Enigmas seem to do extremely well other than that little bit of a neurological glitch. I could go on with leopard geckos forever. We only showed you a small amount of the animals that we keep, and we certainly don't keep all of them here. The future is extremely bright, and whether you're thinking about breeding leopard geckos or keeping one as a pet, they are a great way to start your reptile collection, no doubt about it. And guys, I'm always Facebooking and tweeting and Instagramming everything about BHB, including the leopard gecko group. So make sure to follow me over at SnakeBytesTV. Until next week, you've been watching Snake Bites.